The plague, otherwise known as the Black Death, bubonic plague, and the Great Pestilence. In October 1347, 12 ships traveled through the Black Sea from China and docked in the port city of Messina, Italy. The people who had gathered around the dock to greet the ship soon discovered that nearly all of the sailors were dead. The few who were still alive were on the verge of death. On board the ships, in addition to the sailors, were rats with fleas infected with a bacterium called Yersinia pestis, otherwise known as the plague. Once a person is bit by a flea, he becomes infected with the plague. The plague is communicable. It can spread from person to person by contact with infected fluids, such as blood, and tissue from your internal organs, as well as contact with infected droplets from coughing. Symptoms of the plague include fever, delusions from pain, chills, throwing up, weakness, diarrhea, oozing blood and pus, black buboes, which are swelling in the groin and armpit. All of these symptoms led to death. Because more people were traveling due to trade, there was more contact with people from different parts of the world. This contact allowed the plague to quickly spread. By the fall of 1348, the plague had spread to nearly all of Europe. Within 5 years, over 20 million people had died. That was 1/3 of the total population of Europe. Because the people in the Middle Ages did not understand science, they believed the cause of the plague was a miasma, which means bad air, which they believed was sent by God as a punishment for sinful behavior. A group of people known as flagellants traveled from city to city, flogging themselves as a way to ask God for forgiveness. The Catholic Church saw the flagellants as a threat to their authority because, according to the Church, only a priest could forgive you for your sins. Over time, the Catholic Church outlawed the flagellants. Although 1/3 of Europe's population died from the plague, Jews, Muslims, and the Romani people were able to avoid contracting the disease. These groups of people had better hygiene practices than other Europeans. Aside from the 20 million deaths, there were several other consequences. Social consequences. People started living more sinfully. They thought that they were going to die anyways. They might as well have fun doing it. And so they turned away from the church and began drinking and dancing and partying. Economic consequences. The Black Death led to a food shortage, a shortage in wool because many sheep also contracted the disease and died, as well as a shortage in labor. There were not enough serfs to do the work because so many people had died. Religious consequences. Many people began to question the church's authority. They felt that the church should have been able to save them from the deadly disease, and when it did not, they questioned the church, and many of them left as followers. As a result, the Catholic Church lost some power. Feudal consequences. As many people died, the lords left their land to serfs. Serfs became landowners. There were fewer people alive to work the lands, so those who remained as serfs were able to negotiate for higher wages. Familial consequences. Many people abandoned their families to avoid contracting the plague. This was the only choice they had in order to save themselves. The first outbreak of the plague ended in 1353. Smaller outbreaks of the plague continued to occur in Europe every spring until 1671. From 1900 to 1904, San Francisco experienced a plague epidemic. 113 people died. Modern advances in science and health practices have helped reduce the risk of contracting the Black Death and have made it possible to treat an infected person with antibiotics. However, the plague is not completely eliminated from our society. The end.